problem.
Okay.
With the Canadian artists' representation, Madam Title.
Thank you.
Title.
On behalf of the Canadian Artists Representation, Front des Artistes Canadiennes, along with our 7 provincial affiliates and our partner in Quebec, RAV, I want to thank everybody for having us here today. And I want to begin my presentation with 3 quotations. The first is from the APTN article that announced the death of Annie Putatuk, the Inuit artist who drowned in the Ottawa River several kilometers from here. Putatuk used to compose her ink and crayon drawings that once raised her to international acclaim in the contemporary art world before she was swallowed by the darkness in the alleys and the riverbanks of the capital city that have also obscured her last moments on earth. Putatuk was selling drawings on the streets, floor blocks away from the National Art Gallery, where her work hangs on the walls. She was 46. This next quote is Daphne Ojig, an Indigenous artist from the Ottawa Nation. Quote, "It was not until later on in life that I had achieved a semblance of success, and at 92 years of age, I am surviving on a small pension and returns from dwindling investments." It's worth noting that Daphne Ojig's art now is rapidly resold all over the world, and in 2012, the 12 pieces that were sold at auction would have given her over $7,000 of income had the artist's resale right existed. The third quote is from Peter Taptuna, the Minister of Economic Development for the Government of Nunavut. He's now the Premier. Thank you. Inuit artists have brought their vision of the world to an international audience and built an economic sector that creates jobs and contributes tens of millions of dollars every year to Nunavut's economy. Today, we add our voice in support of the artist's resale right and encourage Canada to address this critical piece of legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is critically incumbent upon the members of this government, settler artists, and all peoples in Canada and across the world who enjoy Indigenous arts to once and for all erase the false distinctions between Indigenous artworks, their lives, and their lands. This point was made in spades again and again by the Inuk artist Billy Goche in this past week, whose hunger strike brought about nation-to-nation negotiations for his land in Labrador. And he consistently spoke of the intersectionality between the health of his body, his land, and his art. So what is ARR, the artist's resale right? It's very simple. It's a 5% royalty of all public sales of art, not private, and it gets kicked back to the artists themselves in recognition of the fact that the value of their work has increased the value of the art throughout their careers. The artist's resale right works to protect and empower all artists, but particularly it raises the most vulnerable of them out of poverty, and mostly Indigenous artists. In Australia, 2 years after implementing the ARR, statistics were taken and they found that over 65% of the artists receiving royalties were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders, and that they had received 38% of all royalties collected. That's hugely disproportionate to the demographics in Australia. In Canada, Indigenous art is not an insignificant industry on First Nations reserves, Inuit communities, and Métis settlements. Just ask the woman sitting next to me how many people in Rankin Inlet make their living off of art. Ask the less than 2,500 members of the Haida Nation, whose art is ubiquitous in Canada, around the world, and gracing the bicep of our Prime Minister. Then ask yourselves to critically assess the industry that has arisen that brings so much Indigenous arts to the professional art market, where the work is highly valuable. These middlemen, who call themselves art dealers, go on to reserves in the north, buy up tremendous amounts of art at wholesale prices, and resell the work immediately on international art markets, where they get double, triple, quadruple the amount of money that they originally paid for it. None of this money goes back to the artists themselves. No artist currently has the right to protect themselves from middlemen who prey on remoteness or poverty in order to make a quick buck. There is only one way to ensure that artists profit equitably from the value of their labor, and that is by implementing the artist's resale right. So, why have I brought the ARR to Finance Committee and not Heritage Committee today? 3 reasons. 1, the ARR has tax implications. The sale of art is considered capital gains and is therefore only 50% taxable. But the ARR takes 5% of this and turns it into artist incomes, which is 100% taxable. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be the only person here who is begging you not to give us money, but rather for us to give you money. This will add money into the Treasury and cost the government nothing to do. Second reason, the ARR is proven to reduce poverty. It is an income generator for artists, who are some of the poorest labourers in Canada. The average visual artist pulls in $18,000 a year, while the value of their labour creates profits for governments and the communities around them all the time.
Dara, if I can get you to sum up in about a minute.
One more second. I just want to make the point that these are not struggling or insignificant artists that are earning the $18,000. These are our best artists, our brightest minds. And, you know, what other industry can boast such success for the people around them, while ensuring that next to no profits go to the labourers themselves? And thirdly, and most importantly, the lack of ARR is actually a trade barrier. 93 other nations in the world have the artist resale right, and some of them since the 1920s. This isn't a new idea. It isn't a risky scheme. It's a why haven't we done this already, right? And that's why the UN has actually recommended that every nation in the world adopt the ARRs before 2012. So we're late, but we're not too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, Mr. Ferguson, Vice President, Policy and Performance. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honourable members. I'm pleased to present a few comments and highlights of our submission on the federal budget. I want to let you know we've been working with kind of unusual